Everyone, and thank you for joining the Boston Beck meeting. I'm Sarah Kravitz and I'm the chair. And before we get started, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, if you would like to receive AAA credits, please use the link in the chat to fill out a quick Google form, and that way we can email you the AAA credits after the presentation. Also, I welcome you to join our BSA Boston Beck LinkedIn group page for all of our upcoming events and presentations. Our March presentation is also going to piggyback off what Josh has to say today about LCAs and embodied carbon and kind of go into a little bit more in depth, but he's going to provide us a great overview of what all these acronyms mean. So another thing is, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat and we will go over them during the presentation. So we don't have to save them to the end like we normally do. And with that, I would like to welcome and thank our presenter, Josh Jacobs. Josh is the Director of Sustainability at WAP Sustainability, where he is responsible for engaging and understanding the global marketplaces, sustainable / healthy rating systems, codes, purchasing policies, and standards. He is also LEED AP and BDNC certified. He has served over 40 sustainability focused committees, including, but not limited to, big breath, ASHRAE 189.1, LEED Steering Committee, USGBC's Pilot Credit Committee, and he's also served on the Water / IEQ group that developed the first public draft of the IGCC. He's also a recurring guest lecturer at multiple universities and has spoken on sustainability building practices on 5 different continents. So we are very lucky to have him. Thank you, Josh, for your time today in putting together this presentation on LCAs, GWPs, GHGs, Epds. We are very excited to dive into that and see what they all mean.
Great, Sarah. Thank you so much. Yeah, that you know, when you're asked for a bio, the marketing team writes up whatever the heck they're going to write up. It's all true. It just is a very weird thing to watch someone else read it all. So again, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everyone, for having me. As Sarah mentioned, please put your questions in the chat. I normally don't ask people to wait till the end. You're not going to interrupt any flow or rehearsed presentation. As I mentioned to Sarah, I'm kind of a flow of consciousness. It just kind of comes out. It's never the same twice. So please make sure, ask your questions. Sarah can jump in and interrupt me because I'm not going to be able to see the chat. And we'll try and answer the question right there. If it's coming up later in the presentation, then it makes more sense at a later time. I'll just let you know. But again, glad to be here with you. And while I'll certainly touch on the building enclosure, I was mentioning when we were talking with Sarah about this, you need a base level kind of fundamental understanding of what the heck we're dealing with, right? When all these sort of things come out. So I wanted to make sure that you guys were given that before going further into how to use them and what they're needed for and things of that nature. So hopefully this can be a good level set baseline for you guys, and then we can go from there. So let me share my screen. This will go share that. And Sarah, just let me know when it is available. Does that work for everyone? Yeah,
you are good to go.
Awesome. So as Sarah mentioned, LCA, Epd, GWP, GHG, what the flip? I'm sure I could make up 3 or 4 more of these and throw them up there and have you folks try and guess which ones are real and which ones are not. But I promise you, all of these are real acronyms that we're literally using today in the sustainable building world and sustainable design. So I'm hopefully going to let you know what each one of these means, why we're actually needing them, and how do we use them in the marketplace that we're in. Sarah mentioned all this, so that's just me. So no need there. WAP Sustainability Consulting, just a little of what we do. As mentioned, we've served on a number of different committees. We've helped write a lot of the language out there in the marketplace that's demanding requirements around EPDs or LCA or global warming potential limits and things of that nature. So hopefully that builds some cachet. And what we do is we actually help. We think of us like regular accountants, right? We are, when people go in and look at people's books, We do that for carbon, except we go into companies and look for carbon. And we've been doing it for a really long time. And again, helped lots of different global organizations go through this concept. So let's start with the why anyone's asking for all this stuff. Hopefully everyone knows by now, we've put ourselves in a really bad spot, right? The globe is warming up. It's not getting better. I've stopped arguing with people whether we did this or not, and just said, okay, you believe what you want, whether you want to believe we did this or not, that's on you, but we need to do something about it. In terms of it's no longer climate change, it's a climate disaster. And we're actively feeling the results of the climate disaster that we're in. And we're moving down a path where our children and grandchildren are going to have a completely different planet if we don't act upon it. So we need to do something, right? I think we all understood that from the fires that originally, right when the pandemic was starting, Australia was facing some serious fires. Obviously, North America, specifically the United States and the Western US, has faced some serious fire issues. In 2019, there were 5 named storms in the Atlantic, which had never happened before at the exact same time. So it's just scary. It's not something, a future concept. So what's happened is the marketplace has been rushed. I feel it's been rushed because I've been screaming about it for 17 years that carbon's a big deal. But the rest of the marketplace has all of a sudden realized, oh crap, we need to do something. So there's been a lot of movement in the marketplace around sustainability and specifically around carbon concepts or greenhouse gas. Everything from things like LEED, which I'm sure a number of your organizations work within LEED frameworks or green globes, to things like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, to financial concepts like S&P Global Ratings or SASB, or CDP is the Carbon Disclosure Project, right? And then you have codes like the International Green Construction Code, but then you also have purchasing programs like the state of California coming out and saying that they're only going to purchase certain things. But there's so much going on that it's sort of, you take a step back and you go, okay, this is just too much, right? Like it's all becoming too much and people are getting pulled in lots and lots of different areas, trying to understand what's going to happen. The other side of it, though, is this financial marketplace. So I want you all to understand, I'm on the tree hugging side, right? I've grown up in a sustainably focused family. I've taught my children how to be more sustainable, how to be a good global citizen. But the real move over the last 2 years and why a lot of people are asking for more information around this is based around the financial marketplace. There's a gentleman named Larry Fink, who is the CEO of the largest investment firm on the planet, BlackRock. BlackRock has $7 trillion in assets under management. About 3 years ago, Mr. Fink sent out a letter to the world. And he said, I need to know your carbon plan. And that was basically what he said. I need to know what's going on with your carbon. I need to understand what you as a public company are doing around carbon. The second year, he said, I need your carbon. I need you to talk and understand your carbon, or I'm going to start voting against your boards. And that's what they did in the last year. They voted against over 600 different boards that didn't have a plan, that didn't have an understanding, that didn't have anything. And then finally this year, he had been called out publicly by a number of organizations who were questioning why BlackRock was doing this, and was BlackRock being quote unquote woke, right? And were they just doing this for show, and what the heck is going on and all of that. And in this year's letter, BlackRock's letter from the CEO, Mr. Fink plainly said it. He goes, I'm not doing this to be woke or hip, and it's not a fad. He's like, what I see in data and numbers, and my company's job is to make money for our investors. What I see in the data and numbers is that companies that reduce their carbon make more money. Therefore, I make more in my investment. So That's why this has become a much bigger animal, and it's not just about saving the planet anymore. I wish people had listened all those years that we were screaming about saving the planet and helping your children and making sure there were pandas in the wild that my kids could see someday. But frankly, I don't care how someone gets to this result. They're here for the financial impacts and their stock prices. Great, bring it on. So just want you to understand that's one of the reasons why this information is being asked for. And I wanted you to kind of get that understanding up front. At the end, I'll also dive into some of those demand drivers individually so that you can understand kind of where these things fit as well. So how are we getting some of this information that's being asked for out in the world? Well, one of the main ways is what's called a life cycle assessment, or it's also LCA. And I do use a lot of acronyms. I will try to make sure to explain what every single acronym is. If I don't, someone please jump up and shout and say, hey, you didn't explain what that is. But now that I've said life cycle assessment, hopefully from here on out, I can just say LCA. It's sometimes also referred to as a life cycle analysis. Analysis and assessment, it doesn't really matter which way, they're the exact same thing. What it does is it's looking at a product in total. It really wants to understand everything about how a product is produced from coming out of the ground to it being thrown away. And sometimes it even is talked about in circularity, meaning some of the product is taken back and recycled, hence why you do hear the term circularity sometimes. This literally includes every step of the process. A full life cycle assessment should include everything from the materials going into the factory to what impact the production of the product has, to the shipping and packaging, over to the use phase to waste, and then what happens with it at end of life and does it restart over. Most people have heard about things like recycling and how that impacts, right? That certainly has hopefully a negative or a reduction in life cycle assessment. But there are times where actually recycling a product, the amount of energy it takes to recycle the product, is worse than getting it virgin material out of the ground. So is that better longer term or not, right? It depends on what you're looking for. Another area that gets focused on here a lot is shipping. People say, buy local, buy local, buy local. I wouldn't argue with that fact. If you want to support your local economy, buying local is a great idea. But believe it or not, in the global supply chain, buying the shipping of material, we've gotten really good at. And we ship lots of it in lots of places. So the shipping is actually a minor impact when it comes to a full life cycle assessment. The main area for products that you folks deal with, the building enclosure world, stuff that doesn't get plugged in or use electricity or use fuel when it's in use, the main area is that materials and production. So people's supply chains to make the products and then the actual making of the products. Those are the two main areas where there's really a lot diving down. So again, when we talk about transport here in the life cycle assessment, it's not a, we certainly have to count it, and we should. And I'm not telling you that if you're buying some SIP panels from the Middle East and they're being shipped on a plane, that's not going to impact. Of course it is. But most of these materials that we use in building enclosures are actually shipped by either large ocean-going cargo ships, which when you start to break it down for the amount of product that you're using and the amount of fuel that ship uses, it's very, very small amount that directly goes to your product. Or we ship it across the country by rail car, which is actually fairly efficient, or we've made it fairly efficient. Obviously, if you were shipping things tens of thousands of miles just on a truck by itself, that's when you would start to get into issues, but most supply chains don't work that way today. But again, I want you to understand that materials virgin from the ground or recycled, the production, the transport, use, and end of life, that is the full life cycle assessment that we're thinking about. And again, I show the first one first because it's got that circle, because that's where we want to go, right? We want things being produced, utilized, and then hopefully have some sort of take back system. I normally joke with people when I'm presenting that waste has just gotten a bad name. We've misnamed waste, right? Waste should just be another supply chain for our society. And we're starting to get there due to some rules and regulations and other countries stopping taking American waste. But we're not fully there yet with all of it. So that's kind of what's in it. But then I want you to understand some of the language that gets thrown around. In things like LEED and green globes and some other areas, they talk about cradle to gate, right? I need documentation of cradle to gate EPDs or life cycle assessments. We'll get to EPDs here in a second. But what they're talking about is truly just the raw material, that supply chain for a product, and then the gate when it leaves the production facility. And the reason that became so popular was because we wrote it into LEED. And I say we, myself and my partner were two of the 3 or 4 people, main authors of the EPD language in LEED. And it's because, first off, building products don't get plugged in, right? They're not like the computer I'm on today, where their main use phase is their largest environmental impact area, or it's a car where the driving of my car is the largest impact area on that use stage. Additionally, a lot of building materials don't have an end of life take back program. So there hadn't been done a lot of research. So we started with this production stage, or what is called in the life cycle assessment standards, the A1 through A3. That's raw material and manufacturing. That's required basically now around the world in any sort of rating system or purchasing program or code. If you are having to give over life cycle assessment data, you're going to have cradle to gate, here referred to as A1 to A3, because that is what is in the ISO standards governing life cycle assessment. There is also the construction stage, A1 through A4, and use stage B1 to B7, end of life stage. Now, there are life cycle assessments that we do fully, right? We do life cycle assessments for products throughout their life cycle, but the communication that gets into the marketplace typically is only in that A1 to A3 stage. Again, folks, I know I'm going a little bit quick with some of this, so please make sure to ask any questions if you have them in the chat. Again, please just jump in and ask the question, and we can go from there.
So Josh, we do have one question.
Sure.
Christopher says, I understand that global ships occupy international waters and their pollution from the worst bitumen materials is not accounted by any country, and therefore effectively does not exist in world numbers. I think that's more of a comment than a question, I think, unless Chris, you want to step up and ask a question?
I just want his comments. Does he agree with me, or are he aware of this, or do you think
Chris,
I'm crazy?
No, so Chris, I am fully aware that the ships in our oceans around the world throw stuff into the ocean. I am 1,000% aware, and I fully agree with you that it's horrendous. I will say that a lot of the shipping organizations are trying to do better with a lot of that. It is not taken into account in the life cycle assessment of a product, of any product on the planet. Do they take into account that refuse from XYZ ship is being thrown into the ocean?
I wasn't referring to material being thrown into the ocean. I was referring to the pollution from the engines, which burn basically basically road tar, which is heated to high temperatures, so it's liquid enough they can burn it. But it is the most polluting material we've ever put through an engine, and that's what they run on. Hundreds of tons of it a day. I don't have my numbers,
Chris, and that's taken into account and shipping of the material, right? So shipping of raw supplies to a factory, you see here number A2, it's taken into account there. The transport, right? So that number is taken into account. The fuel that the ship is burning is divided by, and I always use I use the rubber duck analogy because I don't know if anyone remembers, but about 15 years ago, there was a boat being shipped over from China to Canada that capsized and had a massive shipment of rubber ducks, and now there are rubber ducks floating all over the Pacific, which is a different problem, but also somewhat humorous. And so that fuel is divided by how many rubber ducks are on there. and how many other things on there. So that while very bad pollution wise, when it gets down to that product level, it's actually very small. That's why we say shipping is not a huge, shipping in total, very big problem. But when you divide it, which is what a life cycle assessment does, by the individual products, it's actually a fairly small number.
So we do have another question. What is the number of the ISO standard that governs LCAs? Is it specific to building materials or to all products?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ones. The 14,000s govern some of the life cycle assessment that I'm talking about. I will talk about it a little bit later. So we can touch on that a little bit later, but the ISO 14,000 series, a number of those touch on the individual life cycle assessments that are happening.
And then we have one more that's related to the slide. As related to LCAs, specifically A1 through A3, are we talking about water use and energy use and air pollution, or just embodied carbon?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. So embodied carbon is used as a catch-all term for impact, right? So you hear people, including myself, I consider myself part of the problem. We use terms like carbon or embodied carbon to capture all the concept. A life cycle assessment looks at numerous different environmental impacts. And when we get into the EPD, you'll actually see some of the individual impact areas. And the life cycle assessment, I'll actually put up the life cycle assessment data, and you'll actually be able to see all the specific areas that it's talking about. But a full life cycle assessment looks at multiple different environmental impacts that are happening due to the production of that product, not just carbon. The overall catch-all term, if you were looking for one in that category, we'll get to it, is called global warming potential, but there's also numerous others. So yeah, so that's actually a pretty decent segue into what we're getting into. So we talked about the modules included in the life cycle assessment. I mentioned A1 to A3 is really the target area that a lot of the data comes out. But when the data is shown, you see here on the left-hand side, some of the impact category areas. The first one is GWP, or global warming potential. It's the one that's on everyone's mind. When you hear things like buy clean acts, which we'll talk about a little bit later, or someone purchasing something with a GWP below something, GWP is that catch-all. Like if GWP goes down, a lot of these other numbers are going to go down. There are times, depending on what they replace certain things with, they can go up. But some of the other impact areas are ozone depletion, acidification potential, eutrophication potential, photochemical ozone creation, abiotic resource depletion, both fossil resource and otherwise. So again, a lot of these are in the life cycle assessment and being put into these EPDs that are coming up. So I brought up EPDs a couple of different times. So what the heck is an EPD, right? Like, what are we talking about here when I say EPD? An EPD is an environmental product declaration, right? And it's literally exactly what it means. I'm sure a number of you use certifications, whether it be, a UL certification, whether it be an ICCES certification, or otherwise for structural integrity, for fire ratings, for different things like that. An EPD is not a rating. Please don't take it as someone got an EPD, that means their product is good, or that means their product is X. All it is a declaration verified by multiple third parties of the product's environmental impact. That's all. So we've kind of reversed the name, right? Environmental product declaration. It declares the product's environmental impact. And that's really what it is. It's a transparency document. And to be honest, a life cycle assessment is an incredibly complex amount of information. It also includes secret sauce of manufacturers. So how they make their product, where they make their product, what it's made out of, things of that nature. So they normally don't want to give all that information out. An EPD is a distinct information to be able to put their impact into the marketplace. So what is in this document? It's typically like a 10 to 15 page document, and it contains general declaration information about the product. The most important thing besides the actual impact numbers that are there, though, are it actually defines the declared functional unit of the product. So like gypsum board here on the right-hand side, gypsum board, it's like 1,000 square feet. Okay, our impact numbers are based on 1,000 square feet. So if you're using 10,000 square feet, you take the numbers and times it times 10. Again, it talks about the basic materials and their origin. It does give a bit of a description of the manufacturing process of how the product, but again, it doesn't go into great depth because, again, proprietary secrets. Talks about installation, gives the LCA results by impact category, and then goes into any testing results and verification. So if they do have some of those other verifications and certifications, they would be listed here in the environmental product declaration. So the EPD development process is a long one. Manufacturers, it takes a long time, or it can take a long time to actually come up with this information and data. So this is where it normally gets a little weird for people because I flip slides on them and I have to go backwards, but I want you to see the EPD process here. But it starts with the identification of a PCR, product category rule. A product category rule is essentially like a standard that tells people, okay, all the gypsum board manufacturers, I'll give you an example. If you were to go to 10 gypsum board manufacturers and ask the 10 gypsum board manufacturers, what does recycled content mean, right? Or what's the boundary that we're defining in terms of your factory and different things like that? You would get 14 different definitions. So we need rules to govern what each of these types of products is looking to do. These product category rules are what does that for us, right? They help set up through the development and drafting of a PCR to it being put out for open public comments like standards are, to the committee having to respond to comments, and then it getting an expert panel review, and then it's published and then utilized. So this PCR is what is filtering the LCA data into an EPD. So before we even conduct a life cycle assessment with any manufacturers, we have to identify what flipping product category rule are we going to use, right? Because where is this product made? Where is it around the world? What's going on? And then we get into working with the manufacturers to understand their data, right? Based upon the product category rules that have been laid out. We do the life cycle assessment data, which I've seen, the quickest I've ever seen one done is probably 3 to 4 months. The longest I've ever seen one takes a couple years, depending on how complicated. Obviously, the more complicated the supply chain, more complicated the product, the longer it can take. Sometimes manufacturers don't have all their data. Then that is actually verified by an organization. We do LCAs as WAP. We send it to someone else to verify that we followed the ISO standards, right? We did the life cycle assessment as well as we think we know, according to the organization that we're working with and the ISO standards. Please someone verify this for me. And then we take that information, filter it through the product category rules to give us an environmental product declaration, which we normally work with the marketing team, typically of a product manufacturer, to write up. That is then sent to another third party, a program operator. Some of the ones you might know here in North America, UL is a EPD program operator, NSF is an EPD program operator, ASTM has a bit of a program. EnviroDec internationally is a big one. EBU is a big international program operator where you may be seeing some of theirs. And they take the entire package. They look at the EPD, they look at the life cycle assessment, they look at the PCR, and they say, yes, this is done correctly, and it can be published. And then typically it's published on different websites. The manufacturer can put it on their own, or it can be on things like ul.com/spot or nsf.org or any of the other areas where it's listed. So, Sarah, do we have any other questions around that before I jump into kind of what the results look like and stuff?
We do. I was just about to interrupt you.
Sure.
So we have a couple questions. One of them is, when will there be a consistency in EPDs? For example, not all EPDs are measuring CO2 per cubic meter of material. even between similar products, and not all are measuring the same LCA.
Sorry, you kind of tailed off at the end. I think I understand the question. The consistency. So
Yeah.
the consistency is coming from the PCRs, right? So we are getting more and more consistent with organizations. So like all flooring sold in North America, if they're doing an EPD, should be following the flooring PCR here for North America. But if you're buying something from the international marketplace, it might look different because their product category rules would be different for that area, right? So we're starting to get more and more consistency in things where they are. I don't fully understand the CO2 question because we have to release things as you see here on the actual impact data. Most of the units are referenced, like GWP is referenced in kilogram per CO2 equivalent. I've never seen any other EPD release that doesn't have GWP as CO2 equivalent. And then, ozone depletion level is a CFC kilogram, which CFCs obviously impact ozone depletion and things of that nature. So these are pretty standard how the data is shown down here or in an LCA result table. These units are pretty much a given. I've never seen anyone without. If you have them, I'll have my email at the end of the presentation. You're more than welcome to share those. But the PCRs should be giving us more consistency in different EPDs within the same product category.
Okay, and then do they measure the same LCA phases? Or maybe you're going to go into that.
Yeah, so
momentarily.
again, the product category rules still dictate what should come out in an EPD. So when we do an EPD, we're trying to do as much of the life cycle with as much data as possible. But then what gets filtered into an EPD, as I mentioned, most building products today only have that cradle to gate because of something like LEED, right? Where LEED has said, look, just give us cradle to gate data because most building product manufacturers, their products don't get, their largest impact is in supply and production. It's not in use phase, it's not even end of life, but there are some that are going above and beyond and releasing so when you get an EPD, look for it and see if it says cradle to cradle or cradle to grave, which is obviously the end of life. Cradle to cradle would mean it's coming back. And how much of their take back program happens. We do have some EPDs in the marketplace for certain products that are going cradle to grave, but they're only required to go to cradle to gate, that opening stanza.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then the next question is, does the EPD say something about the actual performance of a material, such as the durability, thermal resistance, etc.?
Yeah, so I'll back up here because we actually do talk about installation, in use, end of life. Again, it can talk about those other things. Other testing results and verifications, if it meets certain ASTM standards, if it's met others, we certainly tell people, look, put as much information on here about the performance of your product as possible, because I've run into way too many organizations that are specifying products based on their environmental requirements instead of the use of the product. I'll give an example from my own life. A number of years ago, we were working with a convention and visitor center, and they thought they had done the right thing. They wanted to get a bio-based, rapidly renewable, easily recyclable, low chemical emitting product for their entryway, the flooring of their entryway, and they chose cork. Well, it was a visitor center that was, fairly busy. And they were on their third cork flooring within like 16 months because they chose a product that works, but didn't work for their use, right? So we always try and explain to people, pick the best product category for your use phase and then decide, okay, how do I choose the best product based on the environment with that, right? While some people may not like it, something like vinyl would have probably been a better choice for that entryway, and then pick the best vinyl you can, based on human health impacts, based on lots of different things. So we always tell people to start with the use phase, because buying your third set of cork flooring isn't helping anything when it comes to sustainability, right? You're actually hurting not only your bottom line, but you're not being very sustainable because it's rapidly renewable, but cork trees don't grow that much cork in 3 years for you to replace your floors all the time because they're being worn through. So,
Great,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, not a problem. And good questions. So again, I kind of went over this. This is the 2 ways that they're typically shown on an EPD. Some have this front part where they talk about this, the 7 individual impact areas. Here you see the 7 individual impact areas, the 2 depletion of abiotic resources, both fossil and elemental. And then the other ones we talked about, the eutrophication, the acidification, photochemical, and ozone. The number 1 that is getting talked about the most is global warming potential, GWP. This takes into more things than just carbon, obviously methane release and other global warming potential concerns get taken in when you do the LCA, but the unit of measure is kilograms per CO2 equivalent. And you'll see things like 3.9 E plus O1 as your number in the A1 to A3 phase. That's what it is. The life cycle assessments are strewn out though. They can be strewn out where it takes the other phases into account. So that's kind of what LCA and EPDs are. I'm going to jump into greenhouse gas, but I want to make sure you guys have asked a lot of good questions, but I want to make sure I answer any questions specifically on LCA and EPD and see, I might be answering some of them later, but I want to make sure you guys have got all your questions answered for this.
At this time, we don't have any more, but if a few pop up, then I'll just let you know.
Sure, awesome. So I've talked about LCA, EPD, GWP, what all that means and how it plays, but I keep hearing the term GHG or greenhouse gas. What the heck does that mean then? So greenhouse gas is a little bit outside of things like LEED or any of the green codes when it comes to product selection. But I want you to understand it because it is a term that gets brought up. And again, when we use terms like embodied carbon or carbon, they're really a catch-all term for a lot of things. What we should be saying more is GHG or greenhouse gas. That's what we care about, right? We're increasing the amount of these greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, of which carbon is one of our largest concerns, but you see some of the other things here that are of concern, and they come in different scopes. So the greenhouse gas calculations and the definitions here are scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. And it's fairly easy to break these down. It can be complicated how you measure some of these things, but scope 1 emissions are direct emissions from your controlled sources, right? So if you are burning combustion fuel, right? So you have your company owns vehicles and you drive those vehicles, that is your scope 1 emissions, right? If you purchase gas and you burn it at your factory, that is your fuel, that counts for you. That is scope 1 greenhouse gas emissions. Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions are indirect emissions from the generation of purchased electricity. So this is where you look at like your electric bill or your gas bill, right? And you say, okay, this is mine, right? I've got this from my electric bill. I know. And then there are, what is the mixture of the grid in your area and how are you getting? That's how scope 2 emissions. So those first 2 are pretty much about fuel and how you're making things run, right? Scope 1 and 2. Scope 3 is where LCA and EPDs play into, because scope 3 are all the other indirect emissions that occur in the value chain. And believe it or not, most people think, hey, all this stuff, scope 1 and scope 2, that's really, that's where we need to focus. Believe it or not, when you're talking about manufacturing of products, the largest impact by far is always in the scope 3 area, right? It's always the materials that they're using to actually put into their product to make up their product. That is the biggest issue, right? This is just another visualization so you can understand. Scope 1 and scope 2 are fairly easy. We know how to truly get these done. In fact, if you were to read the standards, I pretty much guarantee some of you could do your own scope 1 and 2 fairly easily in greenhouse gas. We do this for a number of organizations who are starting out. They don't understand how to do it. They don't understand how to translate their electric bill over into greenhouse gas scope 2 emissions. We help them understand that. And then we move on to the big animal that's scope 3, right? Which can include all their inputs into their product. It can include business travel. Again, it can include capital goods that they've purchased, any leased assets that they have, waste generated during the operation, water, all of that animal. That all scope 3 goes into. So what we've been trying to explain to people is, hey, people feel they're behind because they don't even know scope 1. You get your scope 1 and scope 2 done, that helps feed into other people's scope 3. So all of the work on the different greenhouse gas emissions is incredibly important. Obviously, for certain types of organizations, builders, for example, scope 3 is a major part of their greenhouse gas emissions. So again, that's I throw this in here because I have people say, well, why don't EPDs talk about GHG? So I want people to understand what greenhouse gas emissions are, how they're defined, and they are measured in different ways, specifically than an LCA. Although LCA work and EPDs help feed into some of this scope 3 measurement, for example. So any specific questions around that?
We do. So
Sure.
Greta has a question. She says, it sounds as if LCA/EPD metrics are mostly readily applied to individual building products, whereas GHGs measure performance of buildings. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Greta, it can be, right? So again, our eventual world is we should look at everything across their operational and their embodied impacts, right? Right now, we look at them separately. When you think of something like LEED or code, right, they tell you, hey, do all this over here, get 20 EPDs for LEED, for example, from 5 different manufacturers. That's over here, but they don't really tell you what to do with that. And over here, they tell you to, but reduce operational energy, in the energy section. In reality, we should be looking at those together, because what if, you increase on your building envelope side, right? What if you're reducing the amount of operation so much, but it's costing you all of this embodied carbon, right? And say the embodied carbon is actually more than the operational energy you're saving. Well, then choosing that envelope system is not your best choice, right? We need to be looking at these in concert, and that's our eventual goal in things like LEED and things like code. In your practices, we want to get to the point where, I'll give you the example. All of us who've ever bought an appliance know what Energy Star is now, right? And it's it is the most successful sustainable label in the marketplace, but it talks about one thing: it's operational impact. That's it. So how much greenhouse gas, how much carbon is being put into the atmosphere if I use this? That's great. And a lot of them have shown significant reductions in operational, right? That's wonderful. But how much carbon or greenhouse gas did it take to create that product to save that operational energy? So you're starting to get the point that these things are separate. They need to start being brought together. So again, in the selection of products, yes, looking at individual EPDs is the way to go. Longer term, there are things like GRESB that are looking at product, whole building and their greenhouse gas emission. There are laws, City of New York, City of Washington, D.C., that has greenhouse gas reporting laws for entire buildings, right? They have to understand their scope 1 and 2. But scope 3 is starting to be understood as being as big, if not a bigger problem. Okay, so making sure I get you folks back in the time that we promised. I want to make sure, and again, all good questions, and I think we'll still have some time at the end even to get to some. So we've talked about LCAs, EPDs, GWPs. We've talked about greenhouse gas emissions. I've brought up PCRs, and all bunch of acronyms. I could probably make up 3 or 4 and throw them in here and ask you at the end which ones are made up. But who's demanding this besides the finance that I talked about at the beginning? I threw some names at you at the beginning. There are some high-level carbon, LCA, EPD demand drivers. I talked about LEED numerous times. The Living Building Challenge is also asking for information. There's well pilot credits that actually talk about individual EPDs, BREEAM, Green Globes, the National Association of Home Builders National Green Building Standards. Numerous international rating systems also reference asking for life cycle assessments or EPD. The International Green Construction Code and ASHRAE 189.1 have a section on EPDs. They also have whole building life cycle assessment, which is, again, Greta, I think you were the one that asked the last time, so my apologies at that last question if I got the name wrong, but it talks about whole building life cycle assessment, which is taking individual data and doing a larger look at the life cycle impact of the whole building. And then there are these things called buy clean acts. The state of California was the first one to pass it. State of Colorado already has one, and Marin County has one as well, where they're setting GWP, so global warming potential maximums for individual products in the case of California and Colorado that their states are procuring, or in the case of Marin County, they have a GWP maximum on the types of concrete that can even be used in their county. Not just that Marin County is purchasing, but that can be used for any type of building within Marin County itself. So that is a very big change that is coming. Again, it is taking a while. And again, it's not fully thinking about concepts. That's where we get a little frustrated. And again, we're the largest LCA provider here in North America and one of the largest carbon accounting people in North America as well. We get frustrated when people just talk about the GWP maximum, because think about it. California has a GWP maximum for mineral wallboard insulation. Well, I can get a really low number on GWP for mineral wallboard insulation, but it means it's going to be really thin insulation, right? So that doesn't actually help you save the operational energy that you're trying to. These things need to start being thought of in a more cohesive manner. And we're hopefully starting to have a lot of those conversations with organizations. Authorities having jurisdictions and organizations, excuse me. Another big one here is White House Executive Order 14057, or as it's known, the Federal Sustainability Plan, came out in December. Some of you might have missed it because, again, it came out around the holidays, right in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'm very proud to say that I worked on a piece of a part of a little bit of a part of this. I helped them in terms of what they're looking to utilize for the procurement around net zero emissions. But the US federal government has now put the stake down to say they are going to be net zero emissions in their procurement by 2050, which sounds like a long way away, except it's only 28 years away. That is incredibly close when you're trying to change an entire supply chain. They will do purchases using environmental product declarations and develop GWP maximums. There's already parts of the US federal government doing this, and it's the military service, believe it or not. The GSA has also just recently sent out a questionnaire, a request for information, an RFI, on asphalt and concrete for repaving and use in the land ports of entry around the country. So there are already parts of the federal government utilizing this concept in what they're doing. Some others I mentioned, the financial marketplace. There's things like the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, which is actually merging with different areas, talking around public companies and what investors are looking for. The Carbon Disclosure Project. The Carbon Disclosure Project is more about that greenhouse gas, the GHG. Global Reporting Initiative, again, is also more about GHG. There's the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. This is actually more about risk and what risk your organization has based on carbon data and greenhouse gas data and things of that nature. Science-Based Target Initiative is something where organizations are measuring their greenhouse gas and their GWP and their supply chains and setting targets based on data to actually reduce their impacts. And then MSCI is a rating agency for public companies to say where people are. So organizations are starting to look at their MSCI ratings and say, hey, we're a laggard. There are terms like laggard and good performer and things like that. Additionally, there's also some of the big box retailers in the world. Amazon now has a climate pledge, which has some good parts and bad parts. Walmart has Project Gigaton, where they're trying to reduce the amount that's coming through them. Target has Clean by Design. Home Depot has eco options. Lowe's has lots of different policies around this. I bring up the Higg Index here because some of the clothings that we utilize, I'm actually wearing my WAP Patagonia jacket. They are part of the Higg Index, which is actually starting to look at carbon in our clothing that we wear. So that's a lot of information. One more tool I want to talk to you about is Building Transparencies Ec3. This is a tool that allows you to go in and look at a large group of environmental product declarations that are in the marketplace. There are certain projects that are starting to utilize Ec3. There's also authorities having jurisdictions that are looking at utilizing Ec3. This is being done to hopefully make some of these EPDs a little more comparable. You see the range here. That's because LCA still isn't an exact science, because some of the data, obviously, we're not able to get all LCA data when we're feeding these inputs. We do get as much as we can, and then you have, error bars of how much it can be here. But EC3, this tool at buildingtransparency.org, I wanted you to understand it, because there is a lot of data there that can be gathered from different products depending on where you are in the country. Obviously, you folks in the Northeast for your projects. That is a lot of information in 50 odd minutes. I've answered some of your questions, more than willing to take more, also willing to take any offline. Josh at wapsustainability.com, though, Sarah. So do we have any other questions now that I can get to?
Well, thank you, Josh. Yes, we do have one question from Ryan. Does or how does GWP analysis account for freshwater use? Assuming it does not, what impact category addresses that?
So yeah, so freshwater use, it depends on the product category rules. In life cycle assessment, we can take it into account. We typically do in our life cycle assessments, we ask people to, but the ISO standards governing LCA do not require that freshwater use gets taken into account. We, like I said, when we're doing life cycle assessments, we tell people they should have it in there because it is obviously an impact, and it is something that they should be tracking and understanding what happens with them. Additionally, what most people don't understand, and Ryan, obviously, I'm guessing maybe this is where the question's going. Believe it or not, I saw someone, the gentleman, and I'm forgetting his name, so my apologies, who runs the water carbon nexus at the University of Texas, Austin. Or as those at the University of Texas, Austin tell me, just call it University of Texas. Everywhere else you can use the name, but I like to be specific. There is a good chance that depending on where you're getting your water in the world, you actually use more carbon turning on the tap than you do plugging in a light. But the converse is also true. Believe it or not, most people don't understand that you use a heck of a lot of water just plugging stuff in the production of energy, right? A lot of our plants work off steam, work off needing fresh water to reduce their temperatures, things of that nature in our energy production here in the United States. So those two are intricately linked. Carbon or energy production and usage, and fresh water, both ways, right? Because when you think about our water usage, simply the transport of water from different areas, typically you're needing power to transport water around your system. You're also using water to clean it, energy to clean your water, right? And to get access to new fresh water. So it's an intricate system, and the life cycle assessments we do, like I said, we measure them. Sometimes they're put into public documents. Most of the time they're not, because it's not required to be put into them. But you will see some of that data. Again, when we get that data on amount of water used in a plant, we again go by the PCR definition of how big the product is. We divide that. We understand the carbon that's in there, so it gets dropped into that GWP number. At least in EPDs.
Thanks, Josh. That's helpful.
Yeah, not a problem. It's a good question, man. It's and there's a lot of other things, right? Like there's a debate over land usage, right? Shouldn't land usage be part of LCA? Shouldn't, again, lots of different things get brought up of shouldn't they be in LCA? The answer is yes. LCA should get closer to full life cycle impact as much as humanly possible. The problem is our standards haven't caught up to where they are and the collection of data hasn't caught up. And when I tell people, the first time you take people through an actual life cycle assessment, they're kind of blown away by the amount of detail that's already in there. And the more detail you add, it doesn't get easier, it gets more complicated. So we're working on the stuff we have today. Doesn't mean we shouldn't think about tomorrow. Like I said, we are including things that I know other life cycle assessment analyses aren't, because we know it's something that's should be in there, and we try and make sure that all the ones that we do, we ask for it.
Hi, Josh. I'm Greta. I'm one of the people
Hey,
who
Greta.
talked to you about doing this presentation. I wanted to thank you. I think this is very useful. And I really appreciate your example about the cork flooring in the vestibule and the fact that, you know, you can measure certain things, but is it going to perform? And I guess that's my concern. And one reasons I think we wanted to have a presentation like this. The Building Enclosure Council is mostly concerned with the performance of products. And so I think you hinted at, and I was taking notes, but I maybe didn't write fast enough, that there are people who are kind of trying to put this all together. I think it's always probably going to be a mistake when you try to come up with just one single number, because there's going to be trade-offs. But what are some of the initiatives? Who's working on kind of like the whole building life cycle?
Yeah, so there is a credit within LEED, for example, that takes whole building life cycle, but it doesn't always take in the operational side, right? The whole building life cycle now just adds all the stuff together, right? So you'd have to have your whole building life cycle and tweak your individual picks to see, then also know what it does to your model over here, right? But we're working within the LEED system. We're also working with the US federal government and the Energy Star program. We're working with, within the code system, the ICC, the International Code Council. We're working with ASHRAE, who some of you may know, not always the largest building enclosure, more on the mechanical side, but we're working with ASHRAE to start to understand these concepts.
Right.
What I would suggest to your practitioners is, again, your focus, as I tell anyone in this world, is please focus on the product and the performance first. You have to pick performance first, because throwing away a product and buying a new one is the least sustainable thing on the planet. So focus on how the product is going to perform, and then choose the best environmental impact after that. So like again, should you build your own building enclosure concept where, okay, I need my wall system, I need my insulation, I need my air barrier, I need all of this, right? Or should I use a SIP? Well, that goes building by building, and you guys should make that choice. But once you make the choice, then you can look to things like an EPD and say, okay, well, my choice between these two, insulations, they have the same MERV number, or they have the same R rating, R value, right? So they both get the same R value. They both met my fire requirements, but this one's GWP number is 84 and this one's 97. Go for the 84 one, right? That's a good choice. But you need to make sure the product works for your individual usage at that time, or else all of this is useless, because someone's going to rip it out and replace it, and you're not going to get the next job either if they have to rip it out. So make the choice and then start to look at the individual EPDs and say, okay, until we get a cohesive tool that can give you that one answer that says, this building enclosure, right, it saves you this much energy by being put on, but it counts for this much, GWP over here. Till we work that out for you guys, unfortunately, it's going to be the step-by-step process.
And did you say that it was actually 189.1 that had some sort of whole building?
Yeah, so does
life
LEED.
cycle?
Yeah, LEED has a whole building life cycle credited within it as well. So a number of them do. Whole Green Globes, LEED, ASHRAE 189.1, which is the technical guts of the IGCC, also has a whole building life cycle section.
Yeah.
Again, the only issue that I tell people with whole building life cycle is I always ask in a group, hey, who's done a whole building life cycle assessment? And you may get one hand out of 100 because they're incredibly complex. You literally need to take into account every single thing within a building to do a whole building life cycle assessment. And
Thank you.
again, it's just not done.
Great. Thanks so much.
Not a problem.
Hey, Josh, just one last question to kind of piggyback on Greta's here. So once you've determined the performance targets, because I agree, you got to make sure that your stuff works before you get into the details. But once you've found out what's a good solution for you, practically speaking, are there certain resources out there that are going to help the designers and owners understand exactly which data on the EPDs should drive decision making? Because I mean, it sounds like most people are just going to look at the GWP, but is there more to it than that? And how would you kind of help people through that?
Yeah, so if I had a proxy, Ryan, it would be GWP. And that's where most of the decisions are being made because that's that greenhouse gas. That's our biggest problem, right? It is the Earth is getting warmer. The globe is warming, hence global warming potential. And that's an all-encompassing metric. On most life cycle assessments I've ever seen, when GWP goes down, when a company makes changes that reduce their GWP, almost all the other environmental impact data goes down. There are times when they replace something and there's an unintended consequences. So like photochemical smog creation will go up, ozone depletion might pop, but 98.9% of the time, 99% of the time, that GWP goes down, all the other impacts go down. So GWP is kind of your catch-all.
Yeah.
That's why in things like LEED, you'll see that they require GWP to be reduced by 10 to get that second EPD credit. It's because GWP is kind of the catch-all number.
Okay, no, that's great. So by and large, where we're at right now for EPD review and analysis is largely looking at the GWP numbers.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Josh.
Not a problem, man. Thanks for the question.
I have seen at least one, I was comparing, I think it was roofing membranes, and one had the higher GWP, but the lower water usage, which sort of goes back to Brian's question. So it can be complicated.
It can certainly. Again, there are times where the other numbers pop. There's absolutely no question. But I look at it as nutrition labels, right? The good thing is we're starting to get to the nutrition label concept. Some people in the LCA and EPD world don't like when I talk like this, but I mean, the nutrition labels worked because it allowed us choice, right? Certain people care about fat content. I obviously do not. Other people care about vitamin C or vitamin D or these sorts of things, so it's allowed each of us to make these individual choices based on data, which is where we need to be. I mean, you guys do it every day, right? You guys look at a building enclosure and you make choices and say, hey, this is what I'm caring about today, right? This is what I'm looking in this individual area. And that's what we're trying to do here is just give you more data, which isn't always fun. But at least help you make a better informed decision.
Great. Well, thank you, Josh. Does anyone else have any further questions? All right, and with that, I would like to have one final reminder. I did post in the chat for those who came in a few minutes late that if you would like AIA credits, use the link and we'll follow up and send you an email. And I also welcome you to join our LinkedIn group page for upcoming events. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Josh. We really appreciate your time. Great topic.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.
Have a good night. All right. Before you hop into the board meeting, I'm going to take a break and grab a water and go to the bathroom really quick.
Hey, Sarah, can you post the link again for the get?
Yes.
CDs? I thought I saved it, had it, clicked on it, but it's like.
Do you see it?
I see it now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did we lose anybody? Let's see, Brian, like Stephen
I'm texting him right now. I'm not sure if you knew there was a board meeting.
I had it on my calendar, but we hadn't been reminded recently, so I. I thought I was a member of the LinkedIn group, but maybe I'm not. Not sure. Oh, no.
I'm going to I have my background set to blackout. Does anyone prefer if I change it? Or can you see what I'm sharing?
Comes in fine on my screen.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right, so I'm kind of jumping around here while it's kind of fresh in our minds for the March presentation, and kind of wanted to get your takeaway about Laura. I did see that she was on today, which is good, but also to hone in on specific asks that we want her to cover that perhaps Josh did not. Personally, I think walking through an example of a specific wall assembly and how she makes decisions using these tools and LCAs and EPDs, similar to what Josh kind of mentioned at the end, looking at GWP more weighted than a few of the other, I guess, information. But what are y'all's thoughts?
I was thinking of something like that. Like in this presentation, I kept imagining getting a submittal for a product or an alternate and trying to figure out, is this better? Is this worse? I've never done that before. So it would be cool to see someone else do it, or, they don't have to get too specific. If they don't want to give us a product A, B, C, and then, figure it out.
And I think it would, I agree. And I think I don't think two products one may not be worse or better. It may just be, what are the trade-offs? And if she sort of present the complexities of those decisions, not just say, all I care about is carbon. That's what I'm so glad Josh, put carbon in its place. It's obviously important, but it's kind of a surrogate for much more complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. I also thought it was interesting, not to keep harping on the water thing, but it's just a good example of stuff that gets lost in translation if ever even presented. So it sounds like it makes it into some of the LCAs, but not all of them, and then even fewer EPDs. So, obviously people aren't necessarily using that as a huge factor for their decision-making process. So as he alluded to, people are pretty much just looking at the GWP number, but it would be nice to have, as everyone's suggesting, just sort of an example, step by step. Is that really typical for everyone's decision-making process? Or, and how much sort of back and forth is there between looking at one GWP and the trade-offs for performance or longevity, maintenance, durability, whatever, right?
Great. Do you want me to bring up my email about the talking points, or do we want to kind of have a virtual vote about having Laura present?
Well, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to wonder is we've heard a lot of acronyms. We understand the grand scheme of things. I feel like what everybody's looking for here is sort of almost more like a case study or a if that's not the focus of it, it doesn't seem like there's too many unknowns to, illuminate here. But that's just my perspective. I'm interested in what you guys think.
Yeah.
A case study would be interesting to see if there's like project accounting with these types of numbers. Like what tools are out there? I know there's a lot of tools, but like what tools are actually being used to keep track of all this on a project? And is it easy? Is it hard? Or is it worth it? I think only going through a project, you can really experience all these types of things. So if she has that, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, one thing that I really liked talking to her, and I asked her, what do you do? What's your role? And so she's a designer / consultant, but she performs or creates LCAs for, either a whole building, which she's worked on in the past, but more specifically on certain wall assemblies that she's working on. And so I found that out and like latched on and was like, oh, great, tell me more. Like, can you compare or, like walk us through that methodology? Because I knew that Josh wasn't going to dig into it so much, but that's, I think, kind of like what you said, Luke, is how are we keeping track of this information? But I also specifically asked her, what tools is she using?
Yeah.
EC3, I think that's what Josh did too. And there's also a program by Payette that's called Kaleidoscope, and I briefly checked it out. I don't know if anyone has looked into it, but it's a database where they did like certain wall assemblies and then created an LCA for it. So like your, I guess, typical gypsum board with like an EPIS. I don't know, I didn't get too much into it, but that's what I'm assuming. And so I did ask her to create a slide noting what tools she uses, and she said she's going to email that to me like kind of outside of her presentation, and then that way I can also follow up and put it in our LinkedIn group like after the presentation.
Sarah, that's super interesting, and I think that definitely one of the sort of places we can go, to further upon what was discussed today is this idea of not just LCAs and EPDs for a membrane or a fastener or a piece of insulation, but this, as you just alluded to, this idea of like an LCA for an assembly, because at the end of the day, a lot of us, we know what it's like to be architects, designers, whatever, project managers. There's huge amounts of material to sift through, and I think the next presentation, it would be great if it really focused on how does the designer do their due diligence? How do they do their job? We know what's out there. We know this information is available. How do we really process that in the most efficient way?
I could, I mean, depending on how this presentation goes and whether we want to continue on this theme, I could talk to someone at Payette that I worked with when I was there about Kaleidoscope. I've seen a presentation on it, and it was just sort of beginning, and it came up with some kind of counterintuitive results, which I never had the chance to, my intuition can always be wrong, so counterintuitive doesn't necessarily mean bad, but it made like a brick masonry wall look kind of bad, and I think it's just that, based on lifespans, what is your goal for a lifespan? And in fact, when you start putting together LCAs for products into assemblies, you have to think about, does this owner want a 20-year building or a 100-year building? But
how many times are we replanting?
Yeah, right.
In this day and age with the climate disaster, we have to assume every building should be a 100-year building. I mean, maybe that's no longer an option to build a piece of junk.
I hope not.
Man, that could be one of our next presentations. How do we make sure every building is a 100-year building? I like that, Greta.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Right.
Good luck with that.
I know that's a little optimistic.
I mean, this so-called carbon, whatever, accounting, in a way, it may help, if people care about that. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I already responded to your email, Sarah, saying I thought it was good. Sound like a good presentation. And
I think one of the big things here is, getting her feedback, having attended this presentation, what she thinks she can bring to the table to further this, will be important to inform the discussion. I'm really glad that she joined today. That's great.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
All right, so I will follow up and send her an email tonight or tomorrow morning. See if I can quickly hop on the call with her, because it's able to just rapid fire questions and collect this information. Then I'll get back to you guys tomorrow, and then hopefully we can commit, and then I'll ask her for her bio and learning objectives and a summary. And then Steve, you can upload it into that link that I sent to you for the registration.
Just one last thought. I think, instead of talking about potentially like a third, piece of presentation here or whatever, a third iteration of this topic, Greta, if you know somebody who's worked on Kaleidoscope, maybe it would just be nice to invite them to the next presentation and see if they want to, chime in on anything, as opposed to, set them up to be a primary presenter or whatever, because they may still have something interesting to add to the conversation.
that's a good point. Yeah.
That was good. All right, so let's see. Moving on to programming. So Steve, I think you reached out to Susan and you're going to talk with her sometime this week about the hybrid meetings.
Yep, we're talking at 9 a.m. tomorrow to talk about what the hybrid entails, but it sounds like if we wanted to do a hybrid meeting for our April session, we have that option.
Okay, great. So we'll, I guess we'll table that conversation for now, and then we'll kind of take it on over email. But before we kind of do that, does anyone have, what's our feelings on, say if everything runs smoothly, the BSA is all good to go for hybrid meetings, do we want to do this on April 1st and start tailoring our programming to have a more of a local speaker? What are our thoughts?
Well, would we have to offer beer and pizza if we did that?
Out on the terrace, yes.
I
That's
think
a good
it would be
point.
nice.
I don't know. What is the BSA doing? Are they likely to be able to provide refreshments like we used to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. So Stephen, you want to
Yeah,
add
I'll
that
ask
to
if
your
there will be
list of
beer and pizza.
questions?
Well, I didn't mean to sort of talk about something trivial. It's just maybe if we do this, we want to lure people to go to attend in person, and
I don't think that's trivial.
Yeah.
I don't think that's
No.
trivial, Greta. I think that's a pretty
No.
important topic.
That is, yeah. We can't
Yeah,
show
no,
up
I think we need to
open-handed,
entice them.
empty-handed for dinner time.
Right, especially if it's around dinner time. I mean, we're trying to do the same thing in our office right now to, kind of get people inspired to, come to work, stay at work, that kind of stuff. And, you have to kind of work that muscle a little bit. People don't really want to, and you can't make them.
Especially if we keep the hybrid option and people can sit at home for the hour to watch the meetings, or they can come in. We got to give them a social aspect to it.
Right.
Yeah. And have we found anyone who's successfully done these hybrid meetings, or is that something that you guys are still sort of investigating or chatting about now?
So I think we're talking about it more locally with Susan. I can't speak on the BSA's behalf, but I did go to, or I attended virtually, the Iowa Beck Symposium last week, and that was hybrid,
Okay.
which it worked out really well. They had a camera directed to the presenter, so I saw their slides and just them. They did try to do the breakout rooms like we did for the WAGNY Anise Symposium, and we did a better job with that. mostly because I got stuck in a room with one other person and like no direction. And
Oh, yeah. Well,
they didn't talk to me. So I was like, oh, okay.
Well, I've been to some CSI Boston chapter meetings that are hybrid, and I think it has worked pretty smoothly. I'm not sure it's as sophisticated as this. I think they're going to use this OWL technology at
yeah.
BS. Who knows if it's more sophisticated or not, but I've attended both in person and remotely, and I knew I was giving up the free meal, and no, it's harder to have you chat with people, but so if we needed other input, let's see.
I think if we do a hybrid meeting, we just want to make sure the people that are there in person are having a really good time so that everyone else wants to show up next time.
Yeah. We'll take
We can
photos.
post it on our
we'll put it in,
website.
like LinkedIn. We'll all like
Right.
cheers. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll like market it real hard.
Right. Post it on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Everything.
Yeah.
Look how much fun you missed. It was great.
Right. We'll play on the FOMO card.
I love it. Perfect.
We had after the symposium was really a blast. So
Yeah, it was.
it wasn't hybrid. It was, you had to be there, but it was kind of, wow, these people really do exist.
Yeah, I feel like April 1st, why not? Unless BSA has some issue with it, in which case maybe we do May 1, but I mean, might as well start trying to make this work. So,
Well, our meeting will be at the end of the month. And so
right.
to maybe
Yeah.
we can sign up for some other committee's hybrid meeting.
No, by late April, I like to think that people are going to want to, go stand around on a balcony and chat with each other. Let's hope.
Yep. I like it. All right. So then that's a great segue into our April topic. So we can either continue to piggyback off this kind of like embodied carbon, like selecting materials, whether that's like the payout kaleidoscope. Also, Ryan, I don't know if you talk to your contact, because that can also be an option if you do.
What happens?
I feel like after 2 acronym presentations, maybe we're good on that for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. I agree.
Okay. All right.
We're gonna table that.
We want somebody who doesn't use any acronyms at all in their presentation.
I want to see some details. I want to see building being put together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be great for you like going from the macro high level stuff we've been talking about to just, have someone talk about like stone for an entire session, or someone talk about windows.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
super specific, hyper. Like we could do a round robin with all our companies or something. I don't even know. Just something.
Well, I
very-
know that SGH is giving a talk on detailing concrete that I've been locked out of because it's full for Friday.
Oh, I heard about that.
And
Gotta be quick,
as soon as
Rick.
I got the 4 messages, I tried to schedule and I was already locked out. So I don't know. But that's why I'm thinking concrete right now, because I'm a little bit burned.
Sorry about that, Rick. I'll have to get you the pre-sale next time.
Yeah, come on, Luke. You gotta let us in.
Come on,
What's
Luke.
next?
Maybe I should scout my ticket. You want $10 ahead?
Wait, is this a scalping meeting now?
Ticketmaster's gonna get involved.
That's right. It's for free, but if you really want to attend, it's going to cost you $150.
Well, back to the question about April, we could think of it in terms of then we have April, May, and June.
Yeah.
Then do we meet in July? I can't remember.
Yes.
So
we do
so
meet.
we have to say 4 meetings. Do we want to think of, stone, concrete, brick, and steel or something like that?
Yeah, no.
They
Wow.
call it back
I
to
like
basics or something.
Or,
Yeah,
and
I
then
like the idea. I don't know about those exact 3, but I really like the idea of like 3 fundamental building, types or solutions.
Yeah.
See, I'm thinking, I jumping around slightly, I'm looking at the next subparagraphs on Sarah's memo here, and especially the thing about the building science in academic curriculum. I am on don't ask me how I got this illustrious opportunity, but I'm on the AIA Building Performance Knowledge Committee. And some of us were talking about building science education for architects. And then
Yes.
we have BTEC members on that. I don't know, on that committee. Anyway, we've started having some joint meetings with BTEC people. And it's sort of a special initiative. Duncan McFarquhar is leading us. And it just got started. And we talked last time about actually having some kind of a symposium or conference in the fall on this topic. And so I just wonder if it would be useful to defer that topic for us, maybe to later in the fall. We could, I'm not sure. But anyway, I just thought I would put that information out there, why I was suggesting possible other topics. And
So that's a really good point. And I guess I'm going to slightly jump to the very last bullet point about the WAGD and East Symposium. So that tends to happen in September?
Well, right. It was November in 2019. We had it in November with well, I'm going to call it Build Boston because I didn't like it.
It's ABX.
It'll always be Build Boston to me.
It will be always Build Boston. Right?
Yes. No,
The
it was.
ABX is a strange name.
But anyway, that was in November. And then in 2020, we did not have a symposium. Then 2021, it was at the end of September. And I guess I meant to call a meeting of the planning committee from last year and Beck board members and whatever in February, because I wanted to find out what people were thinking. And one of the suggestions I was going to make is maybe we do it every other year, because already it's been every other year. But we can try to do it again this year, or we could say, and maybe we won't make a conclusion today, but I thought maybe it was a little bit selfish. I would still like to be involved. Other people can take leadership if they like, but I may be sort of involved in this BTEC, AA thing in September. And, that was something that WAGD really cared about, was building science education. And so, I'm just juggling all these thoughts and
what if we help inform the decision about whether or not to do it this year based on the number of qualified sort of presentations that we can get on the table in the relatively near future? Does that make sense?
Well, I guess last year we issued the call for abstracts in March. And then tell me if, and then in, was it by May, we had the kind of schedule, we had responded to everyone. And it would be possible to hold.
We would have to get a topic though, right?
Right, exactly. So we need a meeting in the next couple of weeks to get a topic, but we did a lot of groundwork that it will not be quite so laborious this time.
I agree.
I thought the idea of doing a call for abstracts was great. But and it would be nice to have in-person event.
I understand that you won't necessarily have the time and energy to dedicate that you did last year, but I think based on the success last year, it might make sense to capitalize on that momentum and really give it a shot.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree. And then especially going to the Iowa VEC and how it was hybrid, and the fact that the BSA is also doing that, this is something that we can open up to other, VEC
Yeah.
chapters if they want to attend. Because I was talking to Will Babington and he said, no, sorry, talking to Will, but I was also part of this like carbon leadership forum that I jumped on, and they all knew about the Epd and East Symposium.
Nice.
You would think that it was in Boston, the carbon forum, but I was like, oh, okay. So I think to Ryan's point that we should piggyback off it, and I'll also volunteer to take more of a leadership role. I don't want to take it like on my own. I still think we need a very supportive team, but Greta, I'm more than welcome to, take on any tasks that you don't want to do, and kind of like keep that communication open. But yeah, I'll put it in October as like a question mark. And if you want, you can put together that like symposium meeting and we can talk more about it if we do want to do it this year.
Well, I think I would be happy to contact at least maybe all the committee members from last year and the board. I mean, this is great, this enthusiasm about doing it again this year. And maybe even if I can send the message out today or tomorrow, people can start thinking about themes, so we don't just ask that at the meeting.
Yeah, I was wondering if maybe that's something we can just kind of bounce around in an email chain and start throwing around some theme ideas, between now and the next time we talk. If that makes sense.
Yep.
Hold on, sorry, I just sorry. Yes, right. So I will take responsibility for sending this email that I meant to send a month ago. And I think we still have time, but I want to, I guess I can also contact Susan Green about, how is the calendar looking for the BSA in the fall?
Mhm.
And,
Greta, I'm talking to Susan tomorrow morning. You want me just to mention that? Take it off your plate?
sure. And the idea of it being hybrid and the rest.
Yeah, sure thing.
That'd be great. And Steve, you can maybe have a more glamorous role than simply drafting that wonderful wall section.
It doesn't get any more glamorous than that.
Well, it's true. Seen by millions.
All right, so let's see, you're going to
So I didn't mean to say, just all these topics are kind of working together, but I'm just wondering if there's any way of I think the Wagdianese Symposium is more related to this building science education thing than other. I mean, we might want to get some of the same people to attend. And so, I'll actually this Thursday, we're having another meeting and I'll maybe know more about what the date is going to be for that thing. So, so we can sort of at least have 2-3 weeks in between.
Sure.
Okay, so I guess, are you saying, all right, so I'm throwing this idea out there. So in September, do we want to have a meeting that's tailored more towards academic? Perhaps like, so September is the beginning of like the semester. So maybe we can have something that's tailored more towards students and kind of like we said, is bridging that gap between, graduating and getting into the workforce, but also, I guess, like introducing, what they could do as job roles. Now, I'm taking this from a personal experience because I didn't know what building envelope science was my entire undergrad until someone reached out to me with a job description.
Right.
So personally, I would like to say, hey, civil engineers and architects and whoever, like there's a whole industry out here that we don't teach in the academic curriculum that could be, a career for you. Here's what it's like. And perhaps we can do like a round table discussion.
So when we interview people, there's a section called show and tell that we take them through to explain kind of what we do in building technology as like facade consultants. So I think like you said it, like a round table.
Yeah.
We can call it show and tell. We can call it something like that, where it's targeted towards students. They come and they actually understand what an envelope consultant does, what we can get a waterproofer or somebody that works on the facades to be there. It doesn't have to just be consultants and architects.
I think part of this initiative, though, is to have some building science education for all architecture students. That even if they're not going to become a consultant, that they know how to talk to consultants and they know how to evaluate the consultants. But I don't disagree with what you're saying, Luke, at all.
Yeah. And I think the roundtable idea is great for a couple of reasons, because as a student, you don't want to be given one option. You want to know that there are lots of different options out there for you. And also, I think it's important to see that depending on whether you're talking to an architect, an owner, an installer, a consultant, manufacturer, sales rep, whatever, everyone is going to have a slightly different view and certainly a different sort of experience with building science. And ideally, we could kind of get that all to the table and get some people excited about something or other, right?
I agree. So here's like another idea. If we want to have, I guess, piggyback presentations, is what if we move, never mind. I was going to say if we move that to July, but there's going to be no students attending it. So I guess one thing that, say if we don't have the WAGB and the symposium in October, we could do, Greta, to your point, targeted more towards like architecture students about the different roles of, like you said, a consultant, someone who works in construction, like a sales, rep, and maybe it overlaps with academic and like, the show and tell. But I think that an hour is a very short time for even everyone on the board right here to kind of go through, hey, this is what I do, not to mention also, here's how you talk to me, or, here's how we can work together. There's two different topics, I think, there that are both really valuable. So we could do that where we can have like another round table, but it's more so targeted to a different audience. And we can, target schools in like the Boston area, and can elaborate a little bit more on that. What are your thoughts of breaking it out compared to one or the other?
Do either of these have to do with the sort of facilities managers and like in-house, because that was another thing that we had talked about, which seems related as a roundtable, and now it seems like one of them is more targeted towards students and future workers.
Yes, so I was going to propose that we do that in July. So that gives us enough time to kind of like send out our email. Hopefully by May, we can choose a topic.
I guess I'd just like to back to the September topic.
Yep.
The show and tell roundtable, but I think it's more to understand not so much what a particular consultant does, but
What about like how these
It's really,
graduates can make the best impacts, you know, from an environmental and building science perspective, right? Because they don't necessarily know where to put their time and energy and where they might want to, you know, if they want to make an impact, you know, we want to show them how to do it and where to do it. Is that maybe something that makes sense?
I don't know. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
That's okay.
I liked how you were saying, like, help them direct their energy towards something, you know, I don't know what that something is, but you know, they might not know what they can do.
Yeah.
So this is really more like just introducing students to a type of career. It's different from the building science education question. It's related, but it's more,
Yeah, I'm not sure how much education there will be in this type of presentation besides like just what's out there in the industry, what are people doing,
Yeah.
what's hot right now.
yeah.
If
Yeah.
we're trying to do building science education and we're not necessarily trying to help them, you know, step out into the real world and understand different career options, I'm not sure we even really need to target them specifically, other than just try to get them to attend our presentations.
Yeah.
So what you're
But the
saying is to
people-
not make it so like student targeted?
Well, I'm trying to figure out, why do we target the students? And if it's not to help them with the next year or two of their life as they transition into the work world, and it's more about just giving them good fundamental building science education, well, we do that all the time anyway. And we don't necessarily need to focus specifically on them. Maybe in the background, we just try to get more student and emerging professional engagement in our presentations, as opposed to tailoring a presentation specifically to them. Just kind of to Greta's point about, you know, not making this about, like, there's plenty of other organizations out there whose job it is to help transition these students into the workplace. Maybe that's not the best place for our energy.
I don't know,
Great. I do see your
my
point.
thoughts are evolving, and I'm probably going to contradict myself.
That's
but
all right. We have this meeting.
I am imagining being like a first or second year architecture student or in some other program, and being pretty interested in just hearing some different professionals who work with building science talk about what their work is. Kind of, I guess we can't really have a tour of SGH's labs or something.
Hey, maybe in the fall,
That
who
would be
knows?
awesome.
Yeah,
Hey, that would be great.
it is on my
Yeah.
list. Yeah,
All right.
we're
Oh.
easing up. This is like the test week for us. I hope nobody screws it up for everybody.
Yeah.
But,
Luke, let's not forget that idea. I think that
Yeah.
would be a great way, especially to get some, you know, emerging professionals engagement and whatnot.
well, I'm thinking that if we say we do this event in September, how we lay it out this way, why don't we have October ready to do some educational stuff, not just for them, but maybe for people that are also in the industry that don't know so much about like the building science 101. We have that ready for October, so we can tell the students in September, hey, we're having this presentation in October. If you're interested in learning more specifically about building science or, you know, XYZ, come next month to this.
Right.
Yeah.
And I also think that's a great way to, like you said, Ryan, engage them and kind of hook them into, hey, this is what our group does. Like, if you want to learn more about building science, like this is where you go. And I think having that one-on-one, or not one-on-one, 101 after, you know, perhaps our normal attendees will kind of bat an eye and be like, oh, I don't need to attend that. But I think for recruitment of getting new people to kind of be aware of who we are would be beneficial and would kind of like outweigh that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So that all sounds good. So for April, May, June, I think we'd kind of thrown around this idea of maybe like trying to group those together thematically, and maybe trying to hit just sort of really core building sort of scopes or assemblies. I just have some totally, random ideas I'm just going to throw out and see if anything sticks. Does it make sense to get into storefront or window wall? Because there seems to be a lot of confusion in the industry about what can be done and performance and that kind of stuff. Another totally separate idea, have we gotten into green walls and green roofs at any point? Is that something we want to talk about? And again, all of this would be very specifically from the best practice building science perspective. Just throwing a few ideas out there.
I like that. I like the glazing one. They can easily tie it into like the challenges we're seeing with the backstop right now. Like,
yep,
all glass buildings. Is it really triple glazing moving forward?
Right.
I think that would be a good one. That'd be timely.
Yeah, it ties into this
Skylights.
conversation. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Skylights, you can add skylights to the,
Yeah.
So do you want that to be a separate topic or do you think?
yes.
Okay,
So I think one of the questions that I see a lot is, people looking for passive house performance storefront and then getting confused about what's available and also even just confusing semantics about storefront when there's such a thing as storefront that is leagues beyond the performance of what we would normally call storefront. There's also stuff that is you can get the performance you want but not the hardware you need. It just seems to be there's a lot of confusion in that area right now. And then I don't know, that just seems like something that people might be able to get excited about, because most buildings have glass and it's not all punched openings, and there's some stuff to be learned there.
Rick,
Okay.
I like everything you said, Ryan. Rick, can you just follow up on skylights? I mean, my first impression is that an hour-long presentation on skylights might lack for some content, but can you just let me know what you're thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think I brought it up because I know that it's skylights that are just big holes in a roof that, we have to build sometimes because people want skylights. But I find a lot of people in the industry, they lack the understanding. And I think the skylight industry is as a whole, just like the curtain wall industry, they're really under designed for our current demands. And that's why I have it in my mind, because I talked to a colleague today about some skylights, and it's like, is this the best we can do?
Rick, does it make sense to combine that with single layer structure and that type of conversation, or are you really talking about more discrete little punched openings and such?
I think we could combine it with
Well, I will say that WAGD did a presentation at Payette on skylights, and 1 hour was not enough. It was.
No. 2 hours probably wasn't enough either.
I think you need to understand the difference between three things. These little manufactured, dome type unit
like
skylight,
the Velux ones,
versus a metal framed skylight and what you do for that, and then sloped glazing, which is more like curtain wall that's not completely vertical.
It's not vertical, right?
And to understand the difference between those three things, and in their performance, and the detailing that's necessary. So
I think it'd be very interesting.
I think it could take an hour, and I wouldn't combine it with other
Well, you
topics.
could make it an hour, but
Yeah,
it would be brief.
and then the other one, I see you've got glazing, like storefront versus curtain wall. I would throw window wall in there too, because I think that storefront, window wall, curtain wall is a conversation that comes up so often, and so often people get really far down the design. I mean, I'm talking 60% CD out to bid, and they still don't know what's going to be the best way to approach the building. So helping people inform that conversation and that investigation, I think would be super valuable.
Right.
So I think that discussion, the title of it would be fenestration, which are glazing systems. But that's different from what someone was mentioning a moment ago about
fenestration with an E.
Fenestration.
Which is, you could even mention manufactured aluminum windows.
Yes, you could.
But I think you're right, Ryan, that the biggest confusion is about when to use curtain wall, storefront. And then with all these weird
Yeah.
configurations that someone seems to think is necessary on buildings,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
does it become sloped glazing curtain wall? I think that's one
Yeah.
reason for using curtain walls. Is that
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we get a lot of pushback from owners that say, well, it's cheaper to use storefront. Why can't we just use storefront?
Yeah.
And we have this uphill battle for like the entire project.
Yeah.
So, I think it's good to have people be armed with the knowledge of, what the differences are and
And
what
a
the
lot of it
shortcomings
is-
are.
A lot of it's semantics too. People don't agree on the definitions. I mean, you can
Yeah.
have triple glazed passive house performance storefront that is on every level of a 10-story building,
That's
but
right.
that's not what people think about when they think about storefront. So,
No,
anyway, so that could be interesting for sure. I mean, I don't know if it makes sense to say like vertical fenestration and horizontal fenestration.
no, I
as
think,
the second. Go ahead, Rick.
I think if we keep it as we have it, I think fenestration should be the vertical plane, right?
Yeah.
And anything other than that is either slope glazing or skylights.
Okay.
Okay.
Because I think
these are
that's the
good
way they're
topics.
defined everywhere else. I mean, I think
Okay.
it's consistent.
Does
Makes
anyone
sense.
have anyone in mind about who they would like to reach out to?
Well,
Or do we want to have
The
like
slope-
a designer, manufacturer
look-
talk about it?
For number 2, yes. For number 3, no. I've got nothing.
RDH has somebody
for skylights?
for skylights and slope glazing.
Cool.
Okay. Rick,
Um,
I'm putting you.
Put my name next to it.
So-
When I remember who that person is, I'll tell you, but no, I can look them up.
Well, do you want? No, it's not SGH, it's RDH.
Oh, thank you.
Do you want to,
More,
Other acronym.
another acronym.
do you want to contact Way?
Initially, I could, because I think the last time we talked about this, Way was in that presentation, but he didn't give the presentation. It was
Okay.
his colleague, whose
Luke?
name now leaves me. Yeah, like
Okay.
so many other things leave me.
All right, well, we'll put it on the list. And then does anyone else want to have any contacts for the April one? Ryan, I don't know how strong your contact is, or if you want to kind of like propose the idea and test the waters if they're interested.
Yeah, so my contact would be incredibly knowledgeable up until the curtain wall aspect of things. So storefront, window wall, but I think that it would make sense to have someone with a lot of curtain wall experience to balance out the presentation and have both sides. Usually people are in one camp or the other. So I'm wondering if it makes sense to kind of do a tag team on this one. But
I have a couple people in mind on curtain wall. It's just,
Okay,
I don't
cool.
know if they would want to, it'd be trying to get them to present. So let me ping some people.
You can get
Okay.
Michael Lewis to
Okay.
present on curtain wall. He knows a lot about curtain.
I've never officially seen him present, but I have sat in his office for 2 hours while he presented to me one-on-one. So it would be very enlightening to everybody.
Are we talking-
You might need a
Well,
symposium to get all of his
I
thoughts on
doubt
it.
you can get him to do it, but I'm sure.
We'd
there's
all
some-
have to
there's
go down to
another-
Attleboro and sit in his backyard for a presentation.
Oh, yeah, right.
It'd be wild. Yeah.
Over a couple of beers. No, but
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure
was
there are
gonna
people.
say.
But are we talking about manufacturers reps, or are we talking about installers? I mean, like Ipswich Glass or someone, or
I was thinking of designers. I could definitely also reach out to IBG if we want them to come in and talk about
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I could even recommend somebody else besides IBG. But...
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've had difficulties getting IBG to come in and participate in an event like this. So,
but would it, rather than having one presenter for storefront and another one for curtain wall, another approach would be to have one presenter who who tests these things and another one who installs them. So
yeah,
how tricky is it to get the,
It would,
I mean,
from
we need to just
my
Intertech
perspective-
present on testing.
yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
And also from my perspective, Greta, it would be easy to get any combination of technical director from manufacturing perspective, installer who installs this stuff all the time, and architect who designs it. Two
Yeah.
of the three or all three that work together and have all experience with each other. I think that would be valuable and that would be quite easy to do. So that might make sense.
well, I would love it if there were more subcontractors and contractors involved in BEC. So
That's something I can definitely help with, Greta. That's not of concern. So knowing that that's a priority, this would be a good
Well,
opportunity to
right.
engage them. Sorry.
it's just my thought. I
Oh no,
don't-
I agree. I think it's good.
I can also reach out. No one comes
Oh,
to
yeah.
mind at the
we have
moment other
Sarah.
than Intertech.
That's right. We have some from the construction.
Yeah,
Yay.
We could get A&A glass.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I heard good things about them.
A&A, R&R, JK, Cheviot. I mean, there's
Yeah, there's a lot of
long-
them.
What's up with the
long list.
A&As, like the A&A and R&R?
Because we're tired of using acronyms, and now we're going to use acronyms
The
plus
window
the emphasis.
industry has their own unique tag.
There's- I mean, this is a long list, Sarah, but I mean, Karras and Karras is good. Ferguson, Neudorf. I mean,
Well,
you
yeah.
could go on and on and
Yeah,
on.
yeah, I know. There's a bunch of them.
That's
Yeah.
funny. Okay.
So is there
Uh,
advantage of a company that's big enough that they've done all the types?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's what we would want to do. Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, I can certainly help with that. And anyone else who has other contacts, we can chat about who's the best, for that particular role in the conversation.
Okay, so I think kind of moving forward for April, since we have like 2 months, over the next 2 weeks, right? We'll reach out to our contacts, gauge their interest, see if they're interested in, what they want to talk about. And then, we can like reconvene over email and kind of, I guess, siphon out who we think would be a great fit / combo. And then by, let's see, by like mid-March, we should select someone. So that gives them, a month and a week or so to kind of put together a presentation. Because also if we're having 2 presenters, they need to coordinate. So I'd like to give them more
Yeah.
time than a month to put that together.
Well, I just wanted to throw out one other idea that I've been rattling around in my mind. I think it would be really interesting to do a presentation on panelization and best practice panelization. I know some people, for instance, use gaskets, other people use sealant. There's small panels, there's big panels, there's multi-story panels with terracotta on them and windows in them. Sanford Contracting comes to mind as absolute rock stars, but Island's been doing a lot more work in the area as well.
Sanford, yeah.
Islands
Yeah.
presented on that to the BEC
Yeah.
a couple years
Yeah,
ago. Yeah.
somebody did it, recently.
And it was good. I would gladly
Yeah.
watch it again. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
I work closely with Island, but I also know Sanford's got some really awesome presentation materials. So between the two of them, I'm sure one of them would be, willing, and I think it'd be really interesting.
But are you talking, this is not a subtopic under fenestration. This is
No. This is
No,
I
this
was-
is a different
sorry, I was
topic.
just throwing out another idea here, trying to fill up those couple of months.
We're talking about like June.
Sure,
It's
that
the
would be nice.
It'd
Coming,
be really nice thematic June to April of glazed and panelized and
mhm.
everything that IBG does.
Right.
But-
spring glazing.
But you-
Maybe we even, does it make sense to bump skylights ahead of fenestration, because curtain wall and the conversation about curtain wall versus storefront versus window wall kind of segues into the conversation about panelized or not.
So
Doesn't
flip
have to.
April and May.
Just a thought. Yeah.
May-
I think if we're gonna get multiple presenters for what's now the April topic,
Yeah.
the fenestrations, then I think it'd be
A
great
little
to
more
give an extra month on.
And I know this is probably just a little bit off the point, but since we're talking about that, but we're talking about like cladding and things as well. I'd like to do something on thin skin cladding materials.
Mm.
There's a lot of them out there. Our firm doesn't use any of them because they're all, I just refer to them as basically, waxed cardboard on a metal thing. But it'd be interesting to know, like, I mean, there's a lot of that stuff being used on buildings, and it seems very temporary to me. But I don't know much more about that. But if we could get somebody that would come and give a talk about like durability and ease of use and installation.
So Rick, as someone who works with 12 different manufacturers of thin cladding, I might not be the best fit, but I would be willing to do a presentation covering 10 different kinds of thin cladding without talking about any manufacturer names. Anybody else is just as happy to do it, but I might actually be one of the better fits for that.
Good, you're on for June. No.
Are you, wait a second. So we're talking about 4 types. We have fenestration, we have skylights, we have, are you basically what people call rain screen cladding?
Yes.
And then we have panelization. So the idea of panelization at the end, because all of these things could be panelized.
Absolutely, Greta.
I mean, Ryan, you can be our
That's
ace
right,
in the
glazing.
hole, kind of utility guy wherever we need the opening, or if someone falls through or we want to move someone around.
Right.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
That's what I was kind of hinging for, some other choice in case one or two of these things don't pan out.
Okay, and also if you find somebody else that you'd rather do the rain screen cladding thing, by all means, that's fine with me, but I'll be prepared to do it if need be.
I don't know of anybody, but I think it has to be dealt with in a
You probably
sort
have
of
one of the best
general way.
perspectives on it, Ryan. I'd like to hear you.
Yeah, I mean, I won't do manufacturer names, but what I can do is, 8 to 10, or if not more, different, fundamentally different solutions and their sort of pros, cons, limitations, possibilities, etc.
I think that would be good to know. I mean, that'd be good to have, because I know I don't have the breadth of
Well, like
talk about
comparing
that.
rain screen claddings.
I think you can call it rain.
Well, just the other ones you started out with, skylight, fenestration, this is rain screen cladding. They're all comparing different types.
I don't think we need the word comparing. I think we just went rain screen cladding.
It's just easier to read the outline if it has the main topic. But I would like to mention that there is this new organization called RENA, which I'm sure Ryan is familiar with. And
How's it spelled?
My friend is the director of their education board.
And that's a little different. I mean, the question is, are we only talking about the materials, the panel materials, or are we talking about the systems, how they're?
That's a good question, Greta, and I wouldn't do one without the other.
Yeah, I think we have to talk about the systems.
So then
Materials and systems.
Well, you can't talk about rain screen cladding without talking about how it's attached.
Yeah, I think that's a very important, probably the most important thing is.
But also how it's attached is by and large fairly generic. It just comes down to, basically tributary area for loading, what you're attaching back to and what kind of thermal performance you're looking for, but certain materials have proprietary or more particular types of attachment to the actual cladding itself. But how that then attaches to the building is not particularly magical.
We could also ask Chris Armstrong, who represents Nightwall, to talk about it if he wants to.
True. Although to be fair, Nightwall is like one of a dozen fairly equivalent solutions. And I was going to try and touch on all of them. But if we want to kind of tag team that, I'm open to that as well.
Okay. He may say no. He's like, I don't want to talk to you guys.
Yeah, no, I mean,
long as he knows we got to talk about all the solutions and not just one.
I mean, I'm
Well,
always
he
like
can't represent
manufacturers.
just his brand, so.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think the next couple months is lined up fairly well. So kind of kicking us off with April, Rick, you're going to reach out to your contact at RDH and see if they're interested in talking about Skylights and all the above. And then that gives us a few more months to talk about fenestrations, 2 presenters. Ryan and Luke can either reach out to like designer, tech rep, installer. I guess it'd be a combination of the 2. Combination of 2.
Two or 3. I mean, I think installer is, we got to have the installer on there. It makes sense to have the designer on there. And if we rule out the tech rep, then, we're missing the piece about what's actually possible. So we'll have to see, but 2 or 3.
Got it. And then possible contacts, NA, R&R, but really
that's a whole long list.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I could remove them just because they're, you guys know. But the bottom line would be to decide on presenters by April 15th. So that gives us like a whole month to reach out to people. And then I think that gives them a month and a half to kind of coordinate. So I think that's good.
So why not change July to the panelization and then do facilities managers as part of another series instead of just hanging out there? I don't know, or maybe.
Oh, sorry. And then you want me to move facilities managers?
Are we still talking about the facilities managers? Might be a good segue into, if we're still looking to target students and emerging professionals the next month, it might make sense to keep those 2 together, but I don't know if we decided we were going to
there's
stay
August.
on that.
I think
don't we normally take August off?
I think we usually do.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
but
So
I was
Go on, Greta.
thinking maybe the fall is our big theme, is talking to different stakeholders like facilities,
Sure.
students, like other building owners or something like,
So basically, we'd still have July open for now, Greta. Is that right?
You talked about panelization as a topic for a meeting.
Oh yeah, did that not make it on here yet?
Right.
It did not.
Yes,
Okay.
So
it is, isn't it?
no, I didn't
No.
put it on.
Okay, then yes,
Oh.
Greta, I
Oh.
agree.
That's why I said part of the reason.
Okay, good catch, Greta.
We talked about it, but you didn't type anything in.
I didn't. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
But you're doing
That's
such
all
a
right.
good job, Sarah. I really.
That's right.
I can't spell panel.
And
What? That's not
penalization,
it.
penalization.
Panelization, unitizing, why one, why the other, this sort of thing. Yeah. Cool.
But I think that
Wait, panelization. Why am I not spelling this?
It's
right? Am I
EL.
looking at
It
E?
is
EL.
EL.
It's an E?
Yeah,
Oh.
Like
panel.
the rain screen.
Okay, got it.
Pan-
Got it.
There it is.
And it may be that it's not a, Google, Word doesn't think it's a
word?
real word.
All right,
Yeah.
so it's
Why don't you make it
panelization,
British?
and then
Put-
there was
an
another
S
thing
in
that
there.
you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, there's a conversation about panelizing versus unitizing, but I think if
Okay.
we just focus on panelizing and kind of let them take it where they want to go, I think it'll be super valuable.
Okay. So is there
Basically,
a
just
specific?
leaning on a Sanford or an Island or someone who is like undeniably like the sort of forefront authority on that sort of stuff, and why they see it as being beneficial, when they see it as being beneficial. Because, I talk to these guys and they can just look at a job and know right away whether panelization makes sense or not most of the time. But for some reason, that's often mysterious to the design team and the ownership, and sort of trying to bridge that gap, would be interesting.
Okay,
And
so we're
you're right,
looking for
Island
a
Fabricators did
manufacturer's
present.
rep.
Okay. So, sorry, what was that?
We're
this is
looking for
Rick. Oh,
Rick, can you mute yourself if you?
Oh, no,
I
I
was
think
just
you,
trying to interject.
yeah, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought
Well, Greta.
you looked like you had your phone.
No, Rick and I just keep talking at the same time. I'm sorry, Rick.
No, Rick.
So are we looking for a manufacturer's rep to talk about this?
I think an installer.
Okay,
Yeah, and it's probably going to be Sanford or Island. I doubt we could get them both, although I've had a lot of conversations with both. And, the perspective I get is kind of like, well, in a nutshell, they're happy that they're both happy they're not the only one pushing this agenda, because there's a lot of benefits to building this way. And to be the only person out there trying to extol the virtues of this, it can be difficult. So I think they appreciate each other in the market. So I wouldn't expect them both to get on a call, but I'd expect it'll probably one or the other that presents.
Okay. And you said Stanford?
Sanford. No T, just SAN. But yeah, they're up in Billerica. They have a fantastic facility, and Tom, I've seen his presentations before. They're quite good. So either that or Island. I think either one would be valuable.
Yeah, another option is Massey's Glass and Fabrica. That's a team.
Oh,
I've
yeah.
used before.
I love
Yeah, that's
them.
a good point, Steve. Yep.
Okay.
Yep,
It'd
totally.
be great if we had one installer, one manufacturer, like of a team that has done a project together before, so that they had like a coordinated presentation. But that also might be wishful thinking.
Well, it's a good thought. I know, like Emerson. Just one example of that would be, Emerson College down on the green. That was Sanford Contracting, Elcas Manfredi, I believe, and NBK, and they were swinging 2-story high panels with terracotta and windows in them and everything, and it was absolutely incredible. So there's examples like that that maybe we kind of roll into the presentation, but I want to make sure we don't miss out on the super technical stuff that they are willing to share.
Steve, do you have a contact that or actually who's going to talk? Who wants to reach out to who? I can reach out to Massey and, like I said, get the feel if they have, like, what projects they've worked on to see if they've worked with Island or Sanford. Steve,
I'll reach out to Sanford. I'll reach out to Sanford and Island. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a question of who's willing to present. I think it's going to be a question about who's willing to share the most information, because these guys have developed some really proprietary details that they should want to use to make themselves look awesome, but there may be a little bit of hesitation in terms of the amount of detail they're willing to share. So I think basically whoever's willing to share the most information is going to be the best fit for us, is my guess.
All right, spill the beans.
Spill the beans. Help us do our jobs.
Yeah.
I think it's more important than giving specific solutions is talking about what are the issues you have to do when you join two panels. And
yes.
Supported, how do you connect the air barrier and voids thermal bridging and things like that?
Yeah,
and
that's what I mean, Greta. Absolutely.
Sauce is not so crucial, but someone who can talk about the basic concepts of what you're trying to do.
Yep. And when does it make sense to do it? When not? What are the biggest challenges? Absolutely.
So,
okay. Also, I know that the rain screen stuff is out there a little bit, but just as we move along, I'd be open to sort of requests for what you guys want to see covered in the rain screen presentation anytime between now and then. Feel free to reach out, group message or however you want to do it, and let me know, what you want to make sure I cover, because I'm happy working on my own, but if you have anything in particular you want to be certain is addressed, then I'll make sure it is.
All right, so if it's in June, give us a date. When do you want this information by?
I would like to have everything from you guys by, say, May 1 in terms of what you want me to include.
Great.
Because you're probably going to want to have whatever you're probably going to want my slide deck, by the end of May or something. So you guys have time to review it and everything, right?
Yes. All right. So
okay.
I'm going to also put that in here as a May item.
Well, if you're going to move it to May, say topics for rain screen,
Yeah.
Because right now.
Oh, yes, sorry. Send rain screen topics.
Yeah.
And I can also share essentially an outline or an agenda, probably, by April 1st, so that you guys kind of aren't working in a vacuum or whatever. But so I'll let you know what I'm sort of planning on, and then you let me know anything in particular that you want in there.
All right. And so since we kind of shifted things down, so we moved the facilities manager's presentation to September, October is the academic, and then November is the educational 101. I don't think it's necessary that we choose, 3 months in advance.
Yeah.
So maybe by the end of June. Choose a topic for the facilities manager by this month. So I think that gives us enough time to reach out to people, choose a topic in June, and then actually maybe we choose a topic in May, we choose a person in June, or between June and July. I just like for these months, personally, like a lot of people are out of the office. It's easy for this to kind of, I don't want to say get pushed to the side, but we all want to be outside rather than being on our laptops. So I think it's actually fine that if we choose and have more of a strict deadline by May, and then if we don't get to it by June, that's fine. What are your thoughts on either keeping this for June or moving it to May?
What, moving the deadline for choosing?
For choosing a topic for the facilities manager, which would be in September.
Well, I think, Stephen wrote a nice message. I have not had a chance to send it to my contacts because I know them through LinkedIn and I need to get their email addresses and so on. But I think we need more discussion on what that session will be like.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like we need to bump that up. We have a pretty good amount of stuff queued up here, it seems.
And
okay. And then I also forgot about
sorry,
August.
is that what you were saying, Greta, or were you suggesting we need to talk about this sooner?
Well, I guess the idea was we talked to facilities managers to understand better what they are looking for in building enclosure performance. I don't know if we want to hear more about maintenance or whether as a building facility manager, the bottom line of how much fuel they're spending or how durable things are.
Yeah, or even going kind of full circle to where we started here is what's their life expectancy for the building? Are they all using similar life expectancies, or certain, does it depend on the use or the application of the building? I think it'd be interesting. But yeah, it seems like we have time to reach out to everybody, get some feedback, and then come back, in June and have a further discussion, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to put that on our to-do list to reach out to higher ed facilities managers. And I also want to key in the higher education because that allows us to target, facilities managers who plan to have buildings that last 100 years and what their, considerations are and what they want to learn about, because it is such a broad, topic to include when you're talking to all facilities managers. Okay, great. And then June, I think that we can probably move this, considering it would be, we don't need to choose who we want to talk in October.
Yeah.
So I'll add that to July. Let's see. I'm just gonna say show and academic.
Let's call it building science show and tell.
Perfect.
So we got to keep this all building science. This looks like a pretty fun schedule.
Yeah. Great. And then, so I'm going to remove this. We already talked about it. Actually, no, I'll just.
Sarah, in the conversation with the, I guess we'll call him our national liaison for BEC groups, did we want to discuss or follow up on this sort of national event hosting or any of that, or you want to save that for another time?
Yeah, so I reached out to him, and it turns out Will had like some sort of family emergency, so I'm not going to ping him too much about it.
Okay.
So if I hear
You can
anything
table
back,
that for now if you want.
yeah, we'll table it. But basically,
Okay.
similar to the symposium, BTech hosts a conference that is national, hybrid, and Will was talking to us about if we wanted to host it. So I think it'd be too much if we wanted to do this and the WAGV in the symposium, but kind of also piggybacking that if we didn't want to do the WAGV in the symposium, this is another opportunity or avenue for us to hold a conference. I just don't have much information about it.
I'm just,
that's sorry, go ahead, Greta.
I'm just wondering whether that BTech conference would be this building science education conference that, or whether it would be a separate.
It could be, because I think probably at this point, anything that's planning this year is probably already in the works. So Will just kind of threw it out there saying, hey, if you guys want, you can also host this, whether it's this year or next year.
Yeah, and totally. And I wasn't necessarily thinking that it would make sense to do this year, but just to kind of be aware of like how it works, what all's involved, what it's about, because it seems like something we may want to host someday, some year. And so just kind of getting a feel for what it's all about might be of value. So.
Yep. All right, so we will wrap this up in a couple minutes, but really quickly. So discussing the idea of the board creating a list of contacts who are responsible for sharing upcoming presentations and events. So this kind of stemmed from, us getting more than 25 people to attend our presentations. And how do we do that? Sure, we have the BSA who sends this out. I update the LinkedIn, which I'm going to start doing, the week before and the day of. But also something we can do is create a contact of people we know that are more business development oriented, or are perhaps more on the admin side, who share upcoming events with their colleagues. So that way we're not bombarding, all of our contacts with this event, but more so leaving it up to them to tell their, office, hey, this is something that you're interested in. Yeah. Similar to, I think, how Rick learned about the concrete from FGH. But this would also require someone to copy and paste and send an email every month. So it is more work on our end, but I wanted to know your thoughts.
I think it's a great idea, and I think we can all kind of do that on our own. Like if we have the content to promote the event and we each have our individual lists of these point people, if we want to, we can share and make sure we're not hitting the same people and overlapping, but I'm not sure that's like essential.
Okay.
Well, if these things are posted on our LinkedIn page, could they be posted in a way that we could share them to our, and so all of our contacts would see them?
That's a good point. I don't know if you can share from the LinkedIn group, but when I post in the LinkedIn group, I also post on my personal, so I can tag you guys and you can share it or something along those lines, or you can literally just copy and paste what I post in the LinkedIn group as your own.
That's something that wouldn't take a lot of.
Okay, I kind of like that approach. This isn't a bad idea, but maybe that's something we can develop
Yeah.
more throughout the year if we want to, but for now, I think if we all just kind of go on our personal LinkedIn and share it. see
Yeah,
how that
and
works.
I know for one, I'm going to be sharing this primarily through an email list, you know, not, I mean, LinkedIn, sure, but that's not how I'm going to get the attention of most of the people that I want to engage. So I'll copy paste out of the LinkedIn post and then send it to an email list. And, you know, you guys reach out to the people you know in whatever way you see best, right?
Great. And then last but not least, reaching out to Susan Green to coordinate like our upcoming events. So if we go on our website, on the side, it still says like the WAGD and these symposium like registration and things like that. So maybe, I don't know what the back end is like, other than reaching out to Susan and saying, hey, maybe you can change that so it automatically brings us to our upcoming events.
That would be awesome. We should
Yeah.
find out who can do that. Maybe
Why don't
it's
I
Susan.
add it to my list with Susan tomorrow?
Okay.
All right, sounds good. Thank
We
you.
could turn into a lunch meeting.
Yeah. No, that would be great, because I think there is a little bit of mystery in terms of like exactly how the BSA updates things and whatever. And so that would be great to know how something like that could be done.
Sarah, can you real quick just like go to the BSA website so I can kind of see exactly what we're looking at?
Hold on. Do I have one?
If you just type architects.org, it in,
So this is what comes up, right? And this is the
We might
little
have to
link.
switch screens, Sarah, I think.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
All right.
you may have to close and then share again.
Let's see, share. Okay, can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So here we have the building resources, we have the WAGD symposium, and then we also have the WAGD like science schedule. So these two links are kind of obsolete now. And if we scroll down, we have our LinkedIn, what do you call it, link? I've actually never used that.
I mean, one thing is, you know, that should.
Oh, nice. Sorry,
Cool.
that's new. And then we have all of our previous
That's great.
things, which I occasionally check these, and we have like 14 or 15 views, so that's good.
Okay. That's something.
Right? They're not zero. But yeah, so if we can change these links, and then for resources, oh, it does have our upcoming events.
That's new.
But I
Okay.
find it because you wouldn't think you would click on Building Enclosure Council resources, would you? You'd
Right.
on calendar or
And
something
maybe
like
we just
that.
rename
I
it to
would
like
think
next
it'd be like-
presentation.
Yeah, or it'd
Right.
be like on the front page, our next presentation.
Right.
Yeah.
Or even the title they've already used on the left, upcoming events, you know?
Right. Right. We
That
should
would
just
be a
that
great name
here.
for the link, upcoming events. Yeah. So really all they have to do is
Rename to upcoming events. Be a
Right.
short conversation with Susan.
Yeah, there you go. Rename the link, we're good to go.
Or just be like events or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Rename the link.
yeah.
But
We're
it
pretty
would be
demanding here.
nice if when you came to the website, the first thing you saw was upcoming events, and then you had to go to archives to, you know what I
Right.
Instead of-
Like if
Absolutely,
it was
Greta.
here, upcoming events. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this page right here, this resources page, that could be our landing page, you know? But or
Right. Because
well,
this is the thing that comes up first, especially when you just Google it, you know?
right.
So I think
But
there is
yeah,
a
the
little
first
bit
thing you should see is our upcoming events, and then underneath that you could see past events, and that shouldn't be too hard to reorganize.
I'll ask if we can get that on the front page, and if we can't get that, I'll ask to rename the link.
Okay,
Okay. Great. Yeah.
Steve.
You got it.
Perfect. All right. Stop sharing. So I think that is it That's all I have. Is there anything else that someone wants to talk about?
You're doing a great
Yeah.
job.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks for doing
both
all this.
there.
It's fantastic.
I like being a part of groups, so I found a good one.
Yeah, at least we're not all pulling you in different directions,
It's only
Yeah,
February.
I'm
and
just
if
pulling
you've
you in
gotten-
different directions.
I'll say it's only February and you've gotten a presentation for the rest of your tenure as chair, so that's pretty impressive.
Well, now we gotta act on it, so we definitely have a good plan moving forward, and I'll kind of tweak and check all of my notes for my dyslexia spelling mistakes. And send it out, and that way we can just take it from there. But I think we have our action items and we are set to go. And then once again, I'll reach out to Laura in the morning, and then hopefully we can confirm her as our presentation.
Okay. And then Luke, if you want to chat a little bit about, I know you said you've got, some guys in mind for curtain wall and that kind of stuff. So maybe we can kind of throw around some ideas about that at some point and see what we come up with.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna start putting out some feelers. So if you have a group in mind, don't hesitate to ask them.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Same.
All right, and break.
All
All
right.
right. Good night, everyone.
Have a good night,
Good night,
everyone.
everyone.
See ya.
Thank you.